Hey guys, and welcome to The Therapy Couch, aka TCP, the podcast where real life meets real emotions. Join me here each week where I'll be discussing topics to help you remember who the fuck you are and how to live your best life by being authentically you. We'll dive into the realm of the human experience, exploring the things that matter most. Feelings, trauma, self-discovery, relationships, and all the other complexities that come with surviving the journey of life. I'm your host, Josie Dickerson, and I'm here to create a safe and supportive space where listeners can connect, reflect, and grow. Let's get into it. Hey you guys, welcome back to the Therapy Couch. It's me, Josie. I hope you have had a wonderful week, that you realize the universe is always working out in your favor, and that even if today wasn't the greatest, tomorrow's always a new day, and we can try again. This week, I wanted to talk about the big D, and I don't mean Dallas. I wanted to talk about divorce a little bit and talk about a question I've heard from a lot of people, and a question that I asked myself when I was deciding to separate from my ex-husband. Was, how do you know? How do you know when it's time to let go, time to move on, time to finally, make that decision and put make that first step forward? And I guess really the first indicator is if you're asking yourself that, right? Why are you asking yourself that question? Is it time for us to separate? What have you done to rectify the issues that are happening in your marriage? What are the issues? Are they solvable issues? Or is it really just a difference in, I want to say, growth and where you see life going? And I think that a lot of times, we build up this image of the other person in our heads, and then when they don't meet that expectation, we are let down, and in a way it's kind of our fault, and in a way it's kind of their fault too, right? Sort of. And what I mean by that is I've talked about it in a few other episodes where I say, don't live in Delulu land, when you're starting out in a relationship and, you start conjuring up, what the future is supposed to look like, and you realize the potential of the person you're with, and you fall in love with that potential, not necessarily who they are in that moment. And while I think that it's okay to see somebody's potential, I think it's more important to see the reality of who they are, and if they never changed, would you be okay with that? And say, I guess the thing that happened with me, I'll kind of share some details about my marriage and the reason that I wanted to separate. But sometimes, when you're first starting out in in a relationship, and then you guys decide to get married, sometimes it's the case of, I feel like I'm supposed to be checking a box, I should be here. And so it's you kind of accept some things that maybe you're not really okay with, but then you put the idea in your mind that, oh, it's okay, it'll get better, we'll figure it out. I love them enough to we'll figure it out. And sometimes everything's perfect, and then as life goes on, and things happen and people start to change over the years, I think a lot of times what happens is that people grow apart, and what each individual wants kind of maybe changes, and that's what kind of leads to the separation, or the questioning of should I stay or should I go? And if you're considering divorce, or if you've been through divorce, I'd love for you to share, your experience or your thoughts, or like if you need somebody to talk to. Like I said, I'm always here. You can email me, send me a DM, whatever the case may be. But I'm really interested because a lot of women that I've talked to who have been divorced, like around my age, younger than me, and even much older than me, the biggest, or I guess the most common reason that I hear from women of why they were kind of just done was the fact that they felt like they didn't have any support. Like they were doing everything on their own, and their partner did not know how to support them in a way that like relieved her stress. And I can definitely relate to that. That is one of the biggest things that led me to be like, okay, like I just can't do this anymore. I felt like I was doing a lot of things on my own. And so I just got to the point where I was like, I can't do this. Like, I'm so frustrated. And then it was like, basically, my thought at the time when I was still very resentful and very hurt and very emotional about the situation was, I already feel like a single parent. I already feel like I'm doing everything on my own. So I might as well be doing everything on my own. And then I have one less person's needs and emotions to have to deal with, because I don't feel like my emotional needs are being met, and my support needs aren't being met. So I might as well just do it on my own. And yeah, that was like the biggest reason. And I will say, like I've said in past episodes as well, like in relationships, when things end, it's very easy to get caught up in the, what they were doing wrong and try to put the blame on them. And that's okay for a little while. I think it's, definitely a part of the healing process, where it's like you just put all the blame on them. But then once all that anger and resentment subsides, or even, doesn't subside, it's really, really important to look at what you did wrong. So for a while, probably a long while, when I was thinking about my marriage, I would get so frustrated with my ex-husband and like all the things that he didn't do. And then I stopped at some point focusing so much on what he didn't do and started focusing on, like, where did I go wrong in the relationship too? Because a relationship is a two-way street. It wasn't all his fault. I had trauma and I had issues that I hadn't worked out, and I didn't know how to fix those. And I was doing the best with what I knew at the time. And that's okay. Like sometimes I almost hate to say this, but it's such a fact. Like sometimes love isn't enough. As love itself is such a powerful force, but sometimes love just isn't enough, because guess what? On those days where you're just having a bad time and your partner is just pissing you off, like loving them isn't going to be enough. It's like there's so many factors that go into a healthy and a successful relationship that if you don't take the time together as a couple to work on those, it's hard to build and maintain a healthy, solid relationship. And I think that was like one of the biggest downfalls in my marriage, where, at the beginning, actually pretty much through our entire relationship and our entire marriage, I self-sacrificed. I whatever he wanted or whatever what was going to make him feel the best, I put my wants and needs and feelings on situations on the back burner. And then I did that for years. And all of that stuff started to build up, and the resentment and the anger and the frustration all started to build up. And then it got to a point where it was like to the point of no return. Now I can say, 3 years after my divorce, like, even when we first separated, like, people would ask, like, oh, what happened? And I'm like, I don't have anything bad to say about the man. Like, he's a good man. He's a great dad. You know what I mean? Like, he's a great dad. Like, he has a good heart. I just think our compatibility and, like, the way that we viewed the world and, a lot of this really important things, like the fundamental values of life, like, we just differed on. And I think had I been a little more self-confident and had more self-worth and showed myself more self-love at the beginning of our relationship, perhaps things would have been different. But I also think had I done that, we probably never would have gotten married and I wouldn't have my daughter. So I really believe that everything happens for a reason, and, we're put through situations to learn things about ourselves. And that was, like, my biggest takeaway, was that I was so self-sacrificing that it ended up being the downfall of our marriage, because I had spent so many years, at least, like, the first couple of years when we were dating, pleasing him, like, whatever he wanted or however he felt about the situation. Like, I just, like, gave in and I gave up, and I, like, didn't really, go to bat for myself or, like, really take into account my feelings. I kind of disregarded them. And then, after some time in our relationship, I got frustrated by that. And I was like, well, that's not fucking fair. Well, that was the standard that I set in the beginning of, like, oh, well, whatever you want, that's all that matters. My thoughts and feelings and opinions on the situation don't matter, because I taught you that. I showed you that that was okay to completely disregard how I felt in situations. And so that was a lot of me, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's where a lot of our frustrations came from, because I was like, you're not understanding me, or like, I feel like you don't care about, my feelings, or like how I feel about situations. It's all about you. Like, you're the most important one, and that's the end all be all. But again, I say, like, now that I'm 3 years out of a marriage, like 3 years divorced, I can look back and say, that's a mistake that I made in the beginning. I showed him what the standard was and he met it. And then I tried to change it up, which I think is okay. Like, but when you try to change it up and the other person rejects it, or, is very confused, or is trying, sometimes we let that anger and resentment and all that time spent, like, not showing ourselves or not expressing ourselves truthfully. It's hard to, like, get over that. It's hard to get over that built up anger and those built up feelings on the situation. And then, I don't know. Yeah. Sometimes that's just like what you do in the beginning of the relationship is, like, sets the tone for the rest of the relationship. And so, I take full responsibility in doing that part. And then, there were other things where it's like, I definitely saw the potential of the man that he could be. And, I don't think that I necessarily, it's not that I didn't love him for who he was. When we were dating, or when, even like when we first got married, it wasn't that I didn't love him for who he was, but it was like, I had this idea of, like, the kind of life that I wanted to live. And I saw that potential was there. And then that potential was, like, never reached. And then it was like a disappointment to me. But he had no idea. I think that's the other thing that, like, women need to, like, think about is, like, half the time they have no idea that we're, conjuring up all these ideas and these fantasies in our head. And then when they fall short, we're like mad at them. And it's like, that's not really fair either. And, yeah, I'm sorry. I was just like thinking about that. Like, that's not really fair to them either, because they don't know. So it's like, you feel like they're letting you down, but they don't know that they're letting you down because they didn't know that there was like some sort of expectation or like some fantasy that you're playing out in your head that he has no clue about. And then I think, another thing that really led me to making the decision that it was like time to separate was I didn't feel like I was being treated how I should be treated. And that's just, let me clarify immediately. That's not to say that he ever like treated me bad or was abusive, like physically or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. But because I didn't have a lot of self-worth and I didn't show myself a lot of self-love and all that stuff, I didn't know how to tell him to love me. And so that is where, I also went wrong. I don't want to say went wrong, but again, like when you're going through things, no matter what the situation is, life in general, or, romantic relationships or friendships or whatever, you can only function at the level of what you already know. So if you don't know better, you're only doing the best that you can with what you know. And the more that you know better for the next time, essentially. And, I didn't even know how I wanted or needed to be loved, but I felt in the moment that he wasn't loving me in a way that I needed. I wasn't being supported in the way that I felt like I needed. And, I think I needed time to go and figure that out. And, we had conversations about that where I'm like, I have things that I need to fix. And he was like, well, how can we fix things if we're not together? And I was like, a lot of the things that I need to fix have nothing to do with us. It's more of like me things. And I feel like you're pressuring me into fixing the problem between us. And I don't have space to listen to myself or figure out what I need because I'm so focused on trying to save our marriage when I need to also be trying to save myself from future detriment and, self-sabotaging and not reaching my potential. And so that was a really hard decision, to finally say, okay, this just isn't working. I'm miserable. I'm unhappy. I'm sad. I'm sad. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I'm feeling all of the emotions, and I just don't know how to make it better. And I don't think that as much as I just knew I was done. I just knew, I felt like I had spent years, begging for certain things. And again, like I said, he's not a bad man at all. He's a great dad. I don't have anything bad to say about him. This is me just sharing my experience and how I felt in the moment of trying to make the decision of should I stay or should I go? But I think I spent years begging to be loved in a certain way or to be made to feel a certain way, for him to make me feel a certain way. And I just wasn't getting that. And on the flip side of that, I didn't make myself feel that way, or I didn't know what I needed to do to make myself feel whole, or to feel loved. And so I had a very hard time expressing that to him and, hey, this is how I want to be loved, or, let's have, this makes me feel like this. I didn't have any of those tools. And we had tried therapy. And I think, again, at the point that we tried therapy, I was so filled with resentment and basically just seeing red. I had completely checked out, and I didn't know how to fix it. Now, I will say 3 years out, like, I think it's the best decision that I made. It comes with its struggles. I think it's hard, especially because we have a child together, and it breaks my heart to see, have to shuttle my kid back and forth between homes. And I know that affects her in certain ways. And, I'm not blind to, the other problems that come with being divorced and having a kid. But I think that it's a lot better for a kid to have two happy homes where, there's not tension and anger and fighting all the time than there is for a quote unquote seemingly happy home where the two parents are in the house and there's tension and there's fighting, and the kids can feel that. It's people can feel the energy. You can tell when a couple's like pissed off at each other and they're like trying to fake the funk. Like, you can tell, at least I can tell. And so, like, I also remember growing up in a house where, like, when the tension was like that, or, like, there was arguments, or, there was just, like, nobody was really happy, like, the kids feel that the most, because it's, like, then the adults are unhappy with each other, and then that extends out to, now you're lashing out at your kids because they made one little mistake, or they, you're lashing out at your kids because, I don't know, whatever the hell the reason is, think of one, but, like, that extends outward, and now you're like at work and you're pissed off and you're being an asshole all the time. Like, everything starts in the home. So I will say that, like, I am very happy with the decision that I made as far as, like, my happiness as an individual and all the things that I've learned about myself over the past 3 years. And, first coming out, like, while we were in separation, I asked myself a lot, was like, Josie, like, did you make the right decision? There were nights where, like, I would just sit and cry and be like, oh my gosh, like, did I make the right choice? Like, is this right? Like, am I being selfish? I was such a people pleaser that, like, I felt so bad for, like, making a decision that actually made me happy. And then, I would have moments where I was, like, so happy and so overjoyed. And then, the next day I would have those feelings again of, like, oh God, did I make the right choice? And, this is really hard. And, at least I had backup. Like, there were a million thoughts that went through my head, and I think even that's, like, part of the healing process, or, like, the self-rediscovery process of going through a separation and going through a divorce, is, like, one, your identity was, based around being a wife and a mother and who you are for everybody else. And then all of a sudden, you have this free time where you're like, okay, I have a lot of time to think with myself. And you, again, you promised your life to somebody, and you had these dreams and these plans and these goals as a couple and as a family. And then, like, that is completely shattered. And it's heartbreaking. Like, it truly is. I don't think, even though I was angry and I was frustrated, like, when I thought about those things, I was absolutely heartbroken. And yes, I made the decision to separate, and, but that doesn't mean that, I didn't lose something. It didn't mean that I didn't have a grieving, period. And, I didn't have to go through the grieving process. I did. And it was hard. And I hadn't, other than my mom, like, I saw my mom, my mom's been married 3 times, but, like, none of my friends had been divorced. Like, most of my friends married their high school sweetheart, or married, their college sweetheart, and they're, at least on the outside, like, to my knowledge, they're thriving, they're happy, they're secure in their marriage, and they're happy with, like, their life and where it's at, and, all that stuff. And so, like, I felt like I didn't have anybody to connect to, or be like, like, how do I get over this, or how do I get through this? And so it was like, on top of, losing my family, essentially, or my family unit, and feeling alone. I felt extra alone because I didn't have anybody who could understand what I was going through and the frustrations that I had, and had like made it to the other side where they were healed and they understood, like, you know, even though it hurt. And even sometimes, like I said, I think it hurts more from the perspective of my kiddo versus like how I feel. Like, I don't really feel like I relationship wise, like I'm like missing out on anything. I'm a lot happier with myself and my life. But I think the thing that hurts is like I miss out on time with my kid, and that's like the worst part of it. Now that I'm on the other side, it's not the being single, it's not the being alone. I actually highly enjoy my alone time, and I enjoy being with myself and spending time with myself, but I do miss moments with her, and that I think will forever be heartbreaking to me. It just will. I mean, we co-parent very well. I will also add that, like, we co-parent very well, you know, like, there's no bad blood or anything, and again, you know, that took some time, but when it comes to her, like, we're pretty much always on the same page, and we just, like, both want what's best for her, and decided that, you know, we could put our feelings aside as far as, like, the fact that, like, things didn't work out, and, like, how that's also, like, heartbreaking in itself, and whatever, you know. And I really think that it's just, like, heartbreaking because we have a kid. Like, that's the worst part of this whole thing is, like, I never wanted to be a single mom. You know, my mom was a single mom for most of my childhood. I mean, granted, you know, like, she did remarry and stuff, but it was pretty much just, like, me and my mom my whole life, and I didn't want that for my kid, you know what I mean? I really didn't want that for her, but now here we are, we're in it, and I just try to, if you know me at all, I just try to fantasize everything about life, you know what I mean? Like, life is short, and things are always working out exactly how they're supposed to be, and, like, we have so much power over creating things in our life. So I just imagine, like, mine and my daughter's relationship being like the Gilmore Girls. Like, we're gonna be best friends, and, you know, like, we're gonna have a healthy, like, mother-daughter relationship. But I think that the reason that we're going to be able to have that is because I've spent a lot of time trying to unpack my trauma and trying to reparent myself while I'm parenting her as well. I'm trying to be, you know, who I needed when I was a kid, how I wanted my mom to show up, which, again, like, I love my mom greatly. We had our own traumas and things that we dealt with. But I think that there were a lot of things emotionally that I needed that my mom didn't know how to provide, which, again, no hard feelings, no resentment to her. She did the best with what she knew at the time. And I just think that, you know, I really think in the grand scheme of things for my situation, I may not have had the opportunity to have the relationship with my daughter that I'm going to if I would have stayed in my marriage, because I think I would have been unhappy, and I would have taken my anger out on her, and I would have done what a lot of parents do, where it's like, you're supposed to be seen, not heard, and, like, basically, I don't think that I would have been able to process all of my emotions, like, while I was still in that marriage. So I wouldn't have given her the space to process her emotions. I probably would have shut them down a lot, and then she would have grown up to be like me and shut down her emotions and, you know, not know how to feel things. And then, I don't know. So I really do think that everything happens for a reason. And I also want to say that, like, if you're going through a divorce or you're considering separating or getting a divorce, that everything in this life is about balance. So if you go through a bad divorce, if you're going through a bad marriage and things are very dark and shitty, on the other side of that is something so beautiful. And even if you're in the midst of the storm and you can't see it, I promise you it's on the other side. Like, for every bad thing that happens, there's an equally good thing that happens as well. So, I'm sorry. I'm like trying to think of, really just what to say as far as like divorce. I feel like a lot of times what makes, being divorced worse is like you have that anger and that resentment and those frustrations that are built up that, you kind of get blinded by them. And again, like I've said, take the time to blame them for everything that they didn't do, but also take the time to reflect and realize what you need to work on. And sometimes things just aren't meant to work out, no matter how much you want them to. And you can't love somebody enough to make them change. Like, if they don't want to change, they're not going to. That's for men, for women. Like, if you don't want to do something, you're not going to do it. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a relationship or making a lifestyle change. Like, if you don't want it, you're not going to do it. It's easy to talk about it because, like, raise your hand if, you've been in a relationship where it's like the never-ending cycle of you have a conversation, hey, baby, I want you to change this. Your partner says, okay, babe, I'll change. And for a week, a month, maybe a couple of months, things are different and you think that everything's going to get better. And then all of a sudden, those little annoying habits that they had or those little things that they did before, they start creeping in, and that whatever that little phase was where they changed just enough to make you stay, and it made you stay, like, how many times do you want to go through that? I went through it multiple times. I can't even count how many times I went through that, where it was like, that was the cycle of our relationship. I would bring up an issue. Okay, baby, I hear you. I'll be better. We'll work on this. It'd be good for a couple weeks, maybe a month or two. And then right back to the same old shit. And it was like, eventually you just get tired of it. Like, how many times do you have to have a conversation about the same thing before actual changes are made? And again, sometimes people just change enough just to make you stay, but if it's not a change that they actually really want to make, or maybe they don't know how to make, they're not going to make it. But if they really, to me, like, if I really want to change something about myself, of like, whatever it is, like, if I really want to change myself, I will, like, study about it. Like, I'll go read, or I'll, like, look for information on, like, how to change this about yourself. And again, like, I'm not going to say that there's something wrong with you and that's why you need to change, because I think that we're all perfectly made. But, like, if there is something in your relationship and you really want the relationship to work, then you kind of have to figure it out. And, if you're not the type of person that will, like, go outside, I think the excuse that I've also heard a lot from, given to women, is like, well, I don't know how to do that. Well, you didn't know how to ride a bike at one point and you figured that out. You didn't know how to drive a car at one point and you figured that out. A lot of times when it's like, when something's new, no, we don't know how to figure it out, or we don't know how to do that. But it's like, you take the time and you build the skill, and then you figure it out. So if that's the excuse that you're getting a lot, is like, well, I don't know how to do that. Well, fucking figure it out. At this point, it's on you. Like, I'm trying over here, but I can't do everything for the both of us. And I think that's, correct me if I'm wrong, any experts out there listening, but I think that's like the biggest frustration among women is like the men will be like, oh, well, I'm just a man, I don't have feelings, or like, I was always told that it wasn't okay to express your emotions, or I don't know how to do that, so I can't do that. Like, those are all excuses, because if they really wanted to, they fucking would. Just like us. Like, you know, when you're like stuck in your ways, or like you don't see a problem with something, or you're just like annoyed by something, you're gonna make an excuse instead of being like, okay, like, you know, let's figure it out. So, trying to navigate life after a divorce is definitely, I think, confusing a lot. And like just a roller coaster of emotions, especially like when you're the one who decided that like, it's time to go, it's time to leave. And, you know, you have those, one day you're feeling completely fine, like you're on the high of life, you know, and you're living your life and you're like, oh my God, I'm like finally fucking free. And then all of a sudden you are like having a panic attack, and you are like, what the fuck did I do? Like, why did I just like blow up my entire life? Like, are you sure that was right? Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's in, I don't even, like, I can't even find the words, honestly, like to describe the feeling. It is just an emotional roller coaster. But I think the most important thing when you're going through that emotional roller coaster is to let yourself feel those feelings. So that way you can process them and you can understand yourself a little more. I know a lot of times that we don't necessarily want to feel the uncomfortable feelings, or we just want to push through, and that doesn't last very long. That typically doesn't last very long, and I know it's like one of the hardest things to do, to sit in the uncomfortability of a whirlpool of emotions. But I guarantee you, the more you let yourself do that, and the more you give yourself space to feel those emotions and process them, the easier it will become to process and feel them in the moment, versus having to take, 3, 4, 5 days to compartmentalize and pull it out a little bit at a time. Some days you just need to sit and let all that shit out. Like, whatever it is, like, just let it out. And then also remind yourself, like, everything's always working out for you. Like, I know I'm pretty sure everyone who's met me, like, in real life, and I'm like, oh yeah, like, the universe is always working out for me. Like, they either think that I'm fucking crazy, or I'm, like, super conceited, or, like, something like that. I definitely feel like I get a lot of, interesting feedback when I say that, like, everything is always working out for me, like, good or bad. But it's so true. There's a lesson in everything. And in today's society, we're so busy rushing around. Oh, we have to go to our 9 to 5s. And if you have kids, you got to take the kids to all their extracurricular activities. And, if you don't have kids and you have friends, like, your friends want to see you all the time. And, we're just like on constant go mode, which I have learned, especially in the last, I'd say, year. That is so fucking exhausting. And I used to feel bad about being like, no, I don't want to go here. Like, thank you for the invite, but I don't want to go bowling. Or like, no, I don't want to go to the party. I don't want to go to the cookout. I don't want to go to the bar. Like, and then also dealing with your friends to be like, oh, come on, blah, 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 blah. And who try to unintentionally, I will say for the majority, like, unintentionally, like, guilt trip you, or like get you to come out. But it's like, when you really don't want to, it's okay to say no. It's okay to stop and slow down, and you're not being lazy, and you're not, a piece of shit if you're not constantly in fucking go mode. That was my mentality for so long, was like, oh, you have to work harder, you got to do more, you got to constantly be on the go. And if you're not doing something, like, you're being lazy, you're not being productive, like, you're never going to get anywhere in life if you're not constantly fucking going. And honestly, I was never doing any, I will say previously, right, like in my history, I was not being proactively or productively busy. I was just being busy so I could fucking be busy, so I didn't have to stop and think, because I didn't want to feel my emotions. I didn't want to think about things. I didn't want to do that. So I was just like, oh yeah, just stay busy all the fucking time. Like, just be around people, because if you can solve other people's problems, then you don't have to worry about your problems. And you're being such a good friend when you do that, and you're being so helpful. And while I was, yeah, that would put myself at a detriment. So, like, basically, probably like the first year and a half of my, like, post-separation, post-divorce, I spent a lot of time trying to help other people and fix their problems, because I wasn't ready to fix mine, or like, I think if I would have tried to fix my, or like sit in my emotions, there were so many things that had happened back to back to back that I was afraid that when I started to feel things or like sit with myself, that I was going to lose my fucking mind. Like, I was legit going to have a mental breakdown. And I definitely got to the point where I had pushed stuff down so much that I went through like the deepest depression that I've ever had in my life. And in that time, like, while I was going through that, I guess I won't say like while I was going through that. On the other side of that, I realized that I never wanted to fucking feel that way again. And I read a book, and in the book, the girl said, depression isn't a lack of feeling things. It's your body's response to feeling everything at once, because it doesn't know how to process the individual emotions, because like you basically don't give yourself space to do that. So that's where like deep depression comes from. It's like trying to like bury the bad shit, like, and not feel your feelings. And so then, like, your body and your mind need that time, the time that you're laying on the couch for a week, or like you don't want to shower, you don't want to do any of those things. It's like your body's way of catching up, for you to slow the fuck down, for you to like feel the things and process the things. And then all of a sudden you're like better, right? Like, you're like, damn, I can actually like function like a normal human being. Like, I want to take a shower again. Like, I want to get up and move. And so after, when I got out of that depression, I thought to myself, I said, I don't ever want to fucking feel like that again. And I haven't. I mean, obviously, I have my bad days, or my days where I'm like sad, or I'm feeling some type of way about some shit. But I take that day. I don't try to shame myself and be like, oh God, I'm fucking depressed. Like, I'm not necessarily depressed, but I have a lot of emotional things that I need to sit and unpack. Like, I need to be either by myself, or like, have a conversation with somebody that I trust and respect. So I will say, the longer that you try to push those things down, the worse it's going to be when they all come up. So post-divorce, I would definitely say my biggest advice to anybody, which I didn't do for a while, but if I could go back and change something, which again, I think everything happens exactly how it's supposed to. But I think the one thing that I would change is that I would sit in those feelings, and I wouldn't, necessarily distract myself with other people's problems and like trying to fix fix things for other people, I would really sit with myself and just let myself ugly cry and focus more on like what I needed. And that would be my biggest advice to anybody who's like, again, going through a divorce or on the other side of a divorce. Sometimes you just got to feel your feels, and don't let other people shame you for feeling however you need to feel in the moment. I think that was like how I felt sometimes too, was like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way because of XYZ. Like, fuck how you should be doing anything. Like, do you. Like, at the end of the fucking day, just do you, because other people aren't living your experience. Other people aren't feeling your feelings. Other people, they have their own fucking life. So I don't know why we feel the need to like butt our noses. And I do this sometimes too. So I'm like not shaming anybody. Like, I'm really not trying to shame anybody. But like, we stick our noses where they don't belong, or we tell people like, oh, you shouldn't feel like that. And it's like, who the fuck are you to tell somebody like, oh, you shouldn't feel that way? I think it's a different aspect when you're like, I didn't mean to make you feel that way. Like, I understand that that's how you feel. That wasn't my intention, but I can validate that you feel that way and figure out how to move on from there. But like, when you go to somebody and they're like, oh, well, you shouldn't feel like that because XYZ, and basically try to like negate your entire experience or like invalidate your entire experience, like, they're not experiencing it. They don't know all the tiny little details. They don't know, they don't know anything. They know an outsider's perspective. And so fuck everybody. Just do you. If you get nothing else from this, fuck everybody. Just do you. Show up as your authentic self, like, if you're in a shitty ass mood or if you're fucking sad, fucking be sad, dude. Like, who the hell cares? Like, if people don't know how to deal with that, that's not your problem. They can remove themselves. It's as simple as that. If you don't know how to deal with somebody, or you don't want to deal with somebody's emotions, fucking remove yourself. Like, so don't, which is still something I'm working on, like, I always had the thought of like, oh, I don't want to be a burden, or like, I have to put on this happy face because I don't want anybody to know what's wrong with me, or that something's wrong with me. And I just need to act like everything's fine all the fucking time. No, the hell you don't. This is a reminder for y'all. It's a reminder for myself. Like, you do not have to pretend that everything is okay when you're dealing with a dumpster fire. Like, that's okay. And I'm not saying like, if you're pissed off or you're frustrated or whatever, go out and just be an asshole to everybody. Don't do that. But like, you don't have to put on a happy face and pretend like, oh yeah, I'm so happy today and everything's just so perfect. And like, life isn't perfect. Like, it never is going to be. There's always going to be something going on, But you don't have to mask. You don't have to do that. I think we do that to make everybody else comfortable. And why the fuck do we do that? So yeah, I think that's going to be my final little note is, no matter how you're feeling, go ahead and feel it. It's okay. It's all right if you were the one that decided to leave, if somebody decided to leave you and, you're heartbroken by that. You don't have to pretend to be okay. It's okay for you to like feel your feelings. And if you're going through this and you feel like you're alone and nobody understands it, or, like when you try to talk about your feelings, people just try to brush you off, which hopefully that doesn't happen, but we all know it does. Please feel free to reach out. Like I said, I'm always here to lend an ear or offer some advice or, offer some support through a tough time. And I know I'm a complete stranger, but sometimes strangers end up being exactly what you need in a moment versus, your closest family and your friends. So if you feel like you need that, I'm here. Like I said, reach out on Instagram, TikTok, whatever. You can send an email to us. And I hope you guys have a beautiful week. Remember that you are strong and you are powerful and you are capable of anything that you set your mind to. And even when life is tough, you're way fucking tougher. So don't forget that. And I will see you guys for next week's episode. Okay. Love ya. Bye.